All right, we are live. Welcome to Social Selling Hour on this September 8th. It is a rainy Arizona for me here. Brian Fanzo joining us today with my amazing co-host, Rachel.
Hey everyone! Not raining here, but it's incredibly humid. I think it's supposed to rain later here in California.
Well, and you have that bookcase. I still have to remember I have to get my upgrade my bookcase behind me since I just have
That's
four
right,
books.
IKEA.
Yes. But we're lucky to have Dave joining us. I know he's not sitting extremely still in his thumbnail. We're having some video technicalities there from Dave. So Dave's going to join us via audio. So we'll continue to do the Google Plus Hangout while we're doing the simultaneous Twitter chat with, of course, our hashtag SS Hour. So Dave, welcome to. We're honored to have you today. We are excited to kind of talk a little bit of social business, sales, marketing, and all of the above. So if you could just give us the quick introduction and background about yourself, and we'll get ready to rock and roll with question one.
Uh, Brian, Rachel,
Yep, I can hear you.
group. Okay, super, super. I'm having some technical problems on my side, but in any case, well, thanks for inviting me. It's really a privilege to be part of this. For everybody on the Hangout, you're probably more fortunate just looking at a still picture of me rather than me in real life. I did manage to shave and comb my hair this morning, so. But in any way, the picture is better. I'm Dave Brock. I run a company called Partners in Excellence. We're a business strategy, sales, and marketing consulting company. There are about 15 of us, 9 scattered through the U.S., 4 in Europe, and 2 in Asia. And typically, we work with either early stage high technology startups through Fortune 10 type companies, in really helping maximize their ability to connect with their customers and grow their businesses.
That sounds great, and we are glad to have you. And from especially from our community's perspective, we've been really blessed to have some amazing guests kind of join us and give us unique perspective. And I'm excited to hear not only some of the experiences that you've had in the past based on some of the questions we have, but also kind of the things that you see kind of moving forward and kind of where things are going to go from here. So this should be a exciting hour. Even if and the good thing is I can see that you're going to be smiling at every one of my questions since your still picture has you smiling. That works out well for me. So I already have one win in the checkbox. But we'll go ahead and jump into question one. And question one is, what has changed that is making sales and marketing alignment more important than it was in the past?
Well, I think the fundamental thing is how our customers buy has changed profoundly. And so if we're going to connect with our customers, we're going to connect with them where they hang out, what they, in the ways that are most effective and most impactful for them. So, that requires we change everything that we do, both from a marketing point of view and from a sales point of view, about how we engage our customers.
No, I think that's an important one. I think not only are we in an age where it's the connected, empowered, buyer, but I also like to think that we can no longer, and I'm not sure that everyone would admit to this part, but we can't really kind of believe that the buyer is stupid anymore because Google makes everyone pretty smart, and the combination of Google, mobile devices and social really does empower the the user to really get some, not only have more information at their hands, but also more choices. I laughed often at the buyer now, even if they're in a brick and mortar store, are oftentimes price comparing online live in that store, and so you're not competing anymore with the local store in your town in Iowa. You're now competing with every major market out there. Is that something that I think are, now that sales and marketing kind of have to align in that area, is that something you're seeing as that's happening more and more now, or is it still seem to be a slow kind of curve on that before we jump into question two?
I think it's one of those kind of it depends kinds of things. I think if you look at at buyers across various segments in various industries, they engage different ways. There are some, clearly, I mean, a lot of us hang out in technology worlds and web-based worlds and so on and so forth. So we're all engaged socially. We do a lot of reading of blogs. We do a lot of research online and so on and so forth. I think in some other industries, that's not as dominant as it might be in technology industries. But in any case, customers are changing the way they buy. More and more customers are doing research on the web. So if you look at the traditional role of sales, at least, sales, back in the old days used to have a great function of educating the customer about products, about solutions, and so on and so forth. Today, the customer doesn't need sales to educate them about products and solutions because they can let their fingers do the walking through Google. Likewise, marketing was engaging customers in different kinds of channels, whether it's traditional kind of print, direct mail, or advertising, or those kinds of channels, or through email marketing and so on. So now marketing has a much wider array of channels that we have to engage people in and connect with them. So the web is huge. It's going to get nothing but bigger, but we have to connect with customers across all the channels that they use, not just socially.
No, I think that's spot on, and the community on Twitter is definitely in agreement. We have some really good, comments and questions, kind of talking about the same thing. And Ira Cates, I like he says, all of our messaging has to be on point now because of the ability for someone to, I call it window shopping, but you're window shopping at Best Buy before you're buying at Amazon, or you're buying, and even in the B2B space where oftentimes now you can inquire and read other people's information on a real-time basis while you're having a chat like this with someone and negotiating, getting that information. So it kind of jumps perfectly into, question 2. When we talk about sales and marketing, what do we really mean by that alignment? What does the alignment of sales and marketing really mean to you?
Well, I think you go back to something you just said a moment ago, Brian. Is that all our communications has to be on point, regardless of whether the channel that the customer is getting it through. So whether they're getting information through the web, whether they're getting the information through email, whether they're getting information traditionally or through salespeople, our communication has to be on point and consistent across all the experiences that the customer has. So when we start looking at marketing and sales alignment, the key issue is, are we saying the same things to the customer, and are we saying them in a way that's most impactful and that engages them appropriately? And before we had, we could probably get by with some of those disconnects, but nowadays those disconnects are absolutely unacceptable, particularly, as you say, people are doing real-time comparisons. People are probably on the Hangout right now. They probably have some other screens checking out your, Rachel, and my LinkedIn profiles, our blogs, and saying, are we being consistent with the messaging that we're delivering right now in this Hangout?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great example right there. And we also laugh at the idea that I really stress it, and I think I say it every week, where your digital footprint is your new first impression, and that goes beyond just personal branding, because it's the brand. I don't care what a company thinks that they put on their website about branding, or they talk about culture, or what they're actually trying to sell. It's the people that they're engaging, those people on the front line that they're using social, and I wouldn't say even not using social. You're doing your investigation now online it's even more advanced than Google search. I often I laugh a lot of times because a Google search will return a lot of links and a lot of old data. But if I use social listening tools correctly, I can get more data and more information on you than you probably could have ever imagined in a Google in a random normal Google search. So I think that's and collaboration is no longer optional, I think, when you're talking social businesses today. And so this, I think it's something that we talk a lot. I know Rachel, in her role as especially from a listening perspective, works really closely with sales and marketing on her teams across all of the channels, even outside of just traditional sales and marketing. So,
So
Rachel, do you
So, nope,
go
I
ahead,
was going to
Rachel.
lead into question 3, but if you have more, Dave, go for it.
No, so I think again is because the buyer is so has access to so much information, because it can be really confusing. It really is critical that marketing and sales are totally aligned and in lockstep with what kind of experience are we going to create for the customer as they start shopping and perhaps buying or start even considering kind of new solutions. So we have to be consistent in the way we engage them in our messaging and so on. And that makes this whole issue of marketing and sales alignment, absolutely critical. If we aren't, we're going to drive customers to somebody who is.
So from a business perspective, Dave, what does that mean? So from workflow process, how do sales and marketing truly align?
Well, I think you look at it, you look at the old kind of sales and marketing, and it was, marketing did their thing. We talked about the marketing pipeline, about how they do kind of demand gen, create leads, maybe do some sort of screening of the leads, and then they toss them over to the wall to sales, and sales' immediate reaction was to ignore them. And then go off and do their own thing. I think, so we had these very kind of sequential kind of processes with a lot of kind of contention at the intersection of those two processes. I think now you can imagine that sales and marketing, the workflow is going to be very different. It's going to be much more highly integrated. So if you look at things like the Challenger sale that by Matt Dixon and Brent Adamson came out a couple of years ago, where salespeople are going in to create insight and get the customer all hot and lathered about making a change and maybe entering into a buying motion. So we now can imagine that the salesperson, rather than marketing, the salesperson might be the first person that creates interest and awareness in an opportunity the customer might change, and then the salesperson might hand that off to marketing for nurturing for a period of time until the customer is ready to say, I want to start moving forward and buying, and the salesperson gets re-engaged. So the whole engagement process, rather than being sequential and stacked on top of each other, becomes very tightly interleaved. I like looking at it like it's a basketball team. And, if you look at a basketball team, we have guards, we have forwards, we have a center, and we practice plays, and we practice a process about how it can be very, very effective and score on the basketball court. But in the game, what we find is that practice, that ability to work together as a team, allows us to be very, very nimble and very adaptable to the real world and the real customer buying situation. And I think that's what we're going to start seeing. You can even conceive of, at some point in time, marketing closing the deal rather than sales closing the deal.
And I think that's... Go ahead, Rachel.
No, go ahead. So from that perspective, from a process, it seems that most businesses, they're still very siloed. So what are you suggesting, like shared documents? From a very transparent, tactical standpoint, what would you suggest a business do to better align their departments?
Well, I think we need to look at aligning our sales marketing process with the customer buying processes, and we need to model that. We need to start thinking about what's the total customer buying experience that we want to create, from maybe kind of nascent awareness to getting all heated into an actual buying motion through closing, implementation, and then post-sales type of thing. So we need to map out what that process looks like, and we need to kind of remap roles and responsibilities through that. Again, before it used to be kind of sequential. Now we have to say, what's the way our customer buys? What's the way they want to engage? Maybe, initially they're getting engaged by a salesperson, but we need to nurture that for a while. So marketing kind of takes the lead for that. So we really need to kind of look at that customer buying experience we want to create, and the roles and responsibilities as we go through each step of that buying experience, and who does it.
I think that's an interesting idea. I know we've had some really good debate going on the Twitter chat side. I really appreciate everybody out there on Twitter. I know Dave Stein kind of said, the idea of sales and marketing, especially from a standpoint of how their roles are definitely blending and becoming more one. And I even think I had an old CEO that always preached that he wanted to empower every customer-facing employee with the sales data and marketing collateral, so because everyone in the company sold. And in his mind, if it was an interaction you had on an airplane when you're traveling back from an event, or if it was engaging at a happy hour, there's sales opportunities in all of those aspects. So I think not only are those lines blurring, but I think it's more important now than ever, kind of back to what we were talking about at the beginning, that the stories are the same, but also that you're kind of collaborating together. I think the sales team and including the customer service team should help dictate what part of your content strategy, because if you think about it, we want to solve the problems of our customers. That's technically our goal there with a lot of that content from marketing. Well, how do we know what the problems of their customers any better than the people that are dealing with them every day in customer service and every day in sales?
Right, right. And the other thing, too, is we start talking about this collaboration and work together, then what that says is, we do a lot of work in strategic partnering and strategic alliances, and we have this kind of equation that we say, for these things to work, and really for collaboration and internal collaboration or collaboration with some of our partners, say channel partners and so on, or even collaboration with our customer, we have to look at shared vision, shared values, shared risk, shared resources, and shared rewards. So it means we're really working together. So as we look at it from a marketing and sales point of view, we have to start saying, do we have some common metrics? Do we have some common objectives? Do we have some common priorities? To the degree that those aren't overlapping and in concert with each other, we're going to drive a wedge in the organizations, and people are going to perform based on how they're measured. And if they're measured to do things that are completely in contrast with the customer experience we want to create, the customers will see that real quickly and will start crashing and burning.
No, I couldn't agree more, and I think that that includes leaders. When we talk about dissolving silos and having teams collaborate across teams, we forget that a leader or a manager is only going to buy into that solution if that's going to be what they're going to be measured and rewarded on in the long run. So I think that is something that we have to include. It's great to have the idea of collaboration, but without without the paycheck and the reward matching those goals of collaboration, I think we're always going to be fighting the need for collaboration versus the need for personal growth and personal recognition for what you're working on. I think those are kind of spot on from that side. And I know we have a really good tweet here from John Golden. It begins with what does the buyer value at different phases of their buying journey, and who is the best to create / supply that value. I think that's a telltale sign there of John. John is a previous guest, and the idea that who's selling someone something might actually change depending on the value that we're trying to provide, or even the solution that we're trying to solve. I think that's some really valuable insight. And I think that kind of leads perfectly into question 4. When we talk about what key metrics to track to determine whether sales and marketing are adequately aligned. I think I love talking data and telling a story with data, and if the data doesn't go across multiple departments, there is no collaboration. So, what key metrics kind of do you focus on or talk when it comes to aligning those two?
Well, so first of all, we have to kind of look at saying, what's the buying experience that we're going to create? What are the critical steps that we go through to implement and execute that buying experience? And then from that, we can start saying, what are the right ways to measure our effectiveness in creating that buying experience? So our metrics will be derived from the process. A lot of the metrics that we have in place right now aren't bad metrics. A lot of the leading metrics of things like, whether it's MQLs, SQLs, and those kinds of things aren't bad metrics as long as they're aligned with that whole process that we're trying to take. So, it's things like, are we targeting the right customers? What are metrics around who our programs are reaching, and are we reaching them in the right way? Metrics around again. SQLs, if we agree on sales qualified leads and what a definition of a sales qualified lead is, that's a perfect kind of thing, way to measure. Sales and marketing are aligned with that, so there should be no difficulty with that kind of metric. At some point, I tend to like to, several years ago, I wrote a blog post that said marketing people need to be on a leverage compensation plan or a commission plan. They need to be accountable for creating revenue because that's part of their job. As we look at kind of this new engagement methodology, I don't see anything wrong about measuring marketing people on revenue. Maybe not on specific territory revenue or client revenue, but it might be product line revenue, segment revenue, and those kinds of things.
So we're talking about, obviously there's a clear upside to aligning your sales and marketing, but what are the downsides? Like, what consequences can a business see if they're not well aligned?
Well, I mean, the real downside is they don't connect with the customers. They don't engage the customers. We aren't hanging out where our customers are hanging out. We aren't telling them something that's impactful and that creates value for where they are. We aren't doing something that's guiding them through their buying experience and helping to facilitate that buying experience. If we aren't doing that, somebody is. And that's going to be the organization that gets the business. So a couple of years ago, the CEB, kind of tied with the Challenger book, came out with some data that said 53% of the reasons people buy, or 53% of the reason that people continue to buy from a particular vendor is their buying experience. It has nothing to do with the product, has nothing to do with the brand, has nothing to has less to do with the product, the brand, and the price, but more to do with the buying experience that they create. What are we doing to help them better understand how to run their business, better grow their business, and those sorts of things? So that's how we have to be engaging the customer, and if we aren't engaging the customer that way, then we're losing out. We're not creating value.
No, I think that's, it's very interesting. And this is in a very B2C way, but I went to Subway yesterday, and I hadn't been to Subway in about a month, and I worked from home for almost 4 years, and I went to Subway 3 days a week at that time, especially I was on a diet at the time. And I walked in there to the Subway that's really close to my house, and as soon as I walked in, she asked how I was doing, knew my kids' names, and kind of talked me through the line. Now, she's not the owner, she's a manager there at the place, but I was laughing as I was going back, and my wife made a comment and said, well, why'd you go to Subway and you didn't run up to the other sub place, which we both kind of like a little bit more? And I just looked at her and said, it's a better experience. And she's creating, whoever their manager is, their leader of that Subway is a great example of what we have to talk about in what we're doing, and that she creates an experience that makes me enjoyable, to where I'd rather go there, enjoy the experience, and take a little bit less product, because not only do I know that she cares, but apparently the engagement and the relationship is something of value. So I know it's a little bit different in what we're kind of talking about in our overall scheme, but it's really that does matter in today's buying process for sure.
Yeah, and I if you don't mind me interrupting you, Brian, I'd like to. There's a company that I've kind of tracked for probably close to 25 years, and they've been kind of one of my benchmarks, at least in a B2B basis, for creating these tremendous buying experience. And it's a company headquartered down in Austin called National Instruments, and they sell technology products. But I first started dealing with National Instruments back in the very early 90s, when they were a quasi-partner, quasi-competitor of ours. I ran sales at Tektronix. And we created an experiment. Our vice president of engineering and I created an experiment where we would buy exactly the same products from National Instruments. And we would start engaging the salespeople, the technical support people in conversations. Well, clearly, and we would engage them in the same conversations, but clearly, our VP of engineering, knew what he was talking about, and with me, you could only communicate in monosyllabic words. And so what happened was they started engaging us differently. They started talking to me in ways that I could really understand. And they started talking to my VP of engineering in ways that he could understand and that were meaningful for him, even though we plotted and we were raising exactly the same issues. They were adapting their communication to what created value for us as individuals. The interesting thing is they've tracked my history for 25 years. And they now know that with Dave we have to use single syllable words. The more acronyms we use, the more trouble we're going to have. The more we start talking about technology stuff, the more trouble we're going to have. But they know how to communicate and create value for me. And those are the kinds of things that we have to look at as we engage customers. We have to really benchmark great companies like National who are creating these customer experiences for life too, because I've been in a number of roles since that role back in the early 90s, and they've managed to track me through that and managed to develop communications that are still appropriate and relevant and create value for me.
Well, I think that's impressive. Not only is it impressive that they care, and they show you care, which is a hashtag that I love to use, and I think I drop it every single social selling hour. But I think that's, not only do they take that step, but, it matters to you as well, because it makes your experience, it makes your experience not only a more enjoyable one, but one that, requires less effort. So maybe you can spend more time focusing on how much you're going to buy rather than trying to decipher what they're trying to sell you. I think that's an interesting...
And I have a higher propensity to buy from them, and now I've created a whole bunch of people listening who, if they want to buy a great technology product, they're going to go to National Instruments because those guys are really sharp about the buying experience.
Well, I often say that my first experience with computers was my TI-81 Texas Instruments calculator in middle school, when I was trying to hack one of those so that I could input data into it, so I wouldn't say cheat, so that I could store data that I had in my calculator. So I'm a fan of Texas Instruments for a long time. So we'll jump into question 6 here, and I think this is a good one because for a lot of our audience and a lot of our community, we talk about the importance of collaboration. We talk about the importance of sales and marketing and creating content of value. But what is the first steps they can take to actually make that happen? If today their sales and marketing aren't aligned, what are those first steps they can do to kind of make kind of go down that journey?
Well, first we have to be aligned around kind of our business strategy, our priorities and objectives. So the first thing I like to start asking sales and marketing organizations, and even the strategy part of those organizations, of what problems are you the very, very best in the world at solving, and who has those problems. So now you've gotten everybody unified around a common vision of what we do very well and who we need to direct it at. So that really starts defining our sweet spot. It makes sure that we're all aligned, that we have a common vision of who our customer is and what we can do for that customer. And then from that, we now have to model how are we going to engage them? How are we going to create awareness about these issues, these problems that we're very, very good at solving? Are we going to use things like insight-based selling, Challenger? Are we going to, create some sort of visibility in social media, in the press, or through events, or whatever are we going to do? But now we can start looking at now we've defined our sweet spot. We're going to talk about how we engage them and what that experience is that we're going to create. There's a guy, a good friend of mine, he's at Gartner, a guy by the name of Hank Barnes. He wrote something called the squishy buying cycle. And it really, I think, is looking at the new ways that customers buy. And it looks at, who's best to engage the person at various different ways in that buying cycle, and it isn't as clean and neat as we'd like to make it out to be in our sales process checklists or our marketing process checklists. I'll make sure afterwards I tweet out the link to Hank's article. It's really a very insightful article about the new way of engaging people and whether marketing or sales or how we together do that most effectively.
I thought that was interesting because you talk about the aligning of a story, making sure that not only that you have a common vision, but you know what you do well. And sadly, I think that always is like one of the things that I was surprised that I wish when I was in business, I was majoring in business, and I would often laugh because some of the things that you just assumed everybody did, you didn't realize until you got in the real world, or you started. I remember my first executive board meeting, and them, a company that I was kind of consulting with, they had been I think there 8 years, and they were still mapping out some of their who their target audience was, what their value proposition was, and I was like, how would they have been in business, this long? And there's a little bit to do with the tweaking and the learning as you go, but I think that's one of the things that is still something that not only do we have to align that vision and what you do well as a company, but everyone has to understand that value. I think too often we think that everyone understands that because at some keynote, once a year at your all hands meeting, the CEO told everybody. But really, I think that's something that has to be ingrained in the business, ingrained in the process. There's a company out here in Chandler, Arizona, Infusionsoft, and they do it. They have it on their walls. They have it all over their company. You walk in this huge building where all their employees work, and they have their motto. They have giant replicas of what their target audience looks like, and they have no mistaking. Like me, even as a visitor, I knew what their goals were, I knew what their vision was, and I knew who their target customers were, and I was just a visitor visiting there. So I thought it was a very good job of kind of transcending that just from the boardroom's vision to really every employee understanding and having that vision as well.
Yeah, I'm going through a similar kind of thing right now. I'm going through a turnaround with a very large company, and they've been doing well. I mean, for the last 20, 30 years, but over the last 5 or so years, they've really been slowing down, and it was partly because they lost their identity, and they're trying to be all things to all people, and we've kind of settled down and say, what are the 2 things going forward right now, 2 things that we're going to be the very best in the world at? And we've identified those 2 things, and now we're going to literally each employee in the company and say, how in your job do you contribute to one or both of those things? And if you don't, then stop it. Stop what you're doing. If parts of your job aren't contributing to one or both of those things, then what you're doing is something that's not contributing to our ability to serve our customers and achieve our goals. And so, it's very profound. Now everybody knows that when a customer calls in, they know that this is what we're really focused on being the very best in the world of, and this is how I contribute to that, whether it's I'm a manufacturing person that contributes to that in building products, or I'm a marketing person, I'm trying to convey our messages to somebody, or I'm a customer service person and I have a customer calling in. It's now we're not trying to be all things to all people. We know exactly what we're going to be the best in the world at, and everybody knows how they contribute to that.
No, I think that's extremely important. And actually, there's a couple of tweets that I wanted to, John Golden just kind of jumped in and saying, assumptions are dangerous. Thinking we know what the customer really wants to buy is, I think, a major problem, and there's no excuse for that today. I mean, social and really even beyond social, events, digital data that we have, if people are, I think oftentimes we're taking the wrong approach to the customer being empowered. The fact that the customer has the power, the buyer is in control, they're now giving us all this data that we've always craved. We've always wanted feedback. We always wanted real-time buying process. We want to know their path to purchase. That business intelligence, all of that data is there today. So now, rather than us guessing what that target customer is or what the target customer wants, I feel it's our duty to listen, which is I think often the first step that everybody skips, but listen and then kind of assess from there. And another quote that I wanted to pull in from Twitter, Theo, joining us from across the pond, he said the relationship between sales and marketing is like inception. They're both a function within a function of themselves, and I thought that was kind of spot on as a unique way of not only saying it, but also kind of explaining how the future of those kind of work together. And it kind of works good into we're going to jump into question 7. What are some of the best practices that leading organizations are doing to optimize their alignment? So these are the ones that like you said with Texas Instruments and so on.
Well, yeah, with National Instruments, not
National,
Texas
sorry.
Instruments, but with National, I mean, they have for a long time had a culture that's intensely oriented around the customer and solving their problems. With this company I mentioned a moment ago is, kind of re-identifying who is it, what do we stand for, and what problems do we want to be really the best at. I think all of this always starts with the customer. It's again, who is our customer? How do they buy? What kind of experience do they want to create? And we design our processes and work methods and our messages from the customer in. It's so often I go to organizations and they're designing their processes from the inside out, from what we want to do. If you go back to John's comment about our own assumptions about the customer, the problem is we always get it wrong. So what we do is we keep rejiggering and re-engineering, wasting time and wasting cost in trying to reach the customer the most effective way. The easiest way is go out to the customer, ask them, go live with the customer, see what they do. Ask how they buy, not just one customer, but bunches of customers, and then design your process from the customer in some cases, engage the customers in designing that process. Several years ago, we got involved with what was then Compaq Computer, and they were trying to redesign their approach to national and strategic accounts. Well, we came up with a novel idea. Why don't we go ask the customer about how they want to be sold to? So the inside-out design, if I looked at their largest account at the time, their inside-out design just of their sales coverage had a 51 full-time headcount salespeople to cover this particular account. When we talked to the customer about how they wanted to buy and so on, we came up with a 19 full-time equivalent head count. So the sales organization was less than half what the people did internally. The customer was much more happy with that sales coverage, and we saw that in sales results over the next 18 months. Sales grew at a much higher rate. And also it's in the customer's vested interest for us to serve and support them well, so engage them in that process. So we see, leading people, starting with the customer, engaging the customer in that design process, engaging that in that collaborative type of process, and then working inwards.
Yeah, I think that's important. And actually, something Jill Rawling actually just kind of stated, and I not only do I agree, but I've seen it happen. And the sales and marketing being educated separately, is a major downfall, and I think a fault. And one of the companies that I was working with, one of the coolest things that I saw them do is they had a sales retreat every year, and all of the sales guys went on there. And the year that I joined the team, every single marketing person was invited on that sales retreat, and it wasn't divided as like marketing team and the sales team. It was one team. Everybody acted, went through the same trust falls, and it really kind of gave a very collaborative view. And I remember thinking, the next quarter in, we were sharing data and collaborating much more openly than we had ever before that. And I think it was a lot to do with them feeling that it wasn't what can sales do for marketing and marketing do for sales. It's what can we do together as a team. And I think that's a major thing that is slowly starting to change, is the importance of is teamwork and really keeping training to being consistent. If you want the message and the story to be consistent, shouldn't the training be consistent as well? I think that's a lack of area.
Yeah, it's all of that. I mean, I published a post today that says stop wasting your money on sales training, and the problem is we treat all these things in isolation, and we treat what marketing does in isolation from what sales does. We treat sales training and product training in isolation. All these really interact with each other. We have to really look at kind of a systems approach and how they interact and how we optimize the design of all these interlinked processes to be most effective. But going back, the simple thing is it's amazing how simple things get and how clear they get when we talk to our customers and listen to them, when we talk to each other in our own organizations and listen to them and say, we do have aligned interests, we do have common goals that we're trying to achieve. How do we most effectively go forward with that? You know, it starts with just talking and listening.
So you had a great question pop up on Twitter from Social to Sales asking if sales and marketing are better aligned in startups.
In some sense, yes, because it may be the same individual. in a really small startup, I sit on the board of several startups right now, and I've founded several technology startups. Because of the small size of the team, because of the way the team was founded, is what you do is you find, you know, everybody tends to wear several hats, so you don't think in terms of silos. You don't think in terms of different kinds of functions or different kinds of specialties. You think about getting the job done with whatever resources you have. So you find people, you know, I was CEO of a startup in Paris, France, and I knew on Monday mornings it was my job to empty the trash cans and get the coffee going. And that was part of what we did. So as we grow and as we have to start adding more structure and more process, that's where we start seeing the divisions, you know, where we start establishing our first marketing department and our sales department and our design department or product management group. You know, there we start seeing the splits starting to come up, and just kind of almost without any thought, the walls start growing between those organizations as they start splitting apart.
So as businesses scale, how can they avoid the common roadblocks, like the silos that sales and marketing naturally fall into?
I think one is by getting themselves together and aligning around, you know, what are our common goals, what are our objectives, how are we going to get there. So, you know, we really need to look at immediately at the adjacent organizations. So, for instance, I come from the sales side, so immediately what I would look at is saying I need to be absolutely in lockstep with marketing, product management, and customer service. We need to get together and say, how are we going to represent ourselves most impactfully and most effectively to the customer? You know, likewise, I probably am not going to do that with manufacturing, but likewise, you know, product management, product development, and manufacturing need to kind of get together in lockstep. So, you know, overall, you start doing that. Brian said something at the outset of this thing. Is it starts from the top. It starts from the culture that the CEO and the top management set, and it starts from the personal examples that they set. You know, if they aren't talking to each other and communicating to each other and collaborating as an executive management team, then why would we expect the people down below in the organizations to do that as well? So they need to set that example of having shared and aligned goals at the executive management level, demonstrating that visibly in the way they work and the way they engage and present themselves, you know, not just lip service, but genuinely present themselves to the people, and then push that down in the organization. You are going to have disagreements. You know, every organization has disagreements. You have to have an escalation methodology of a way that you resolve those disagreements.
But I think that's important. Not only is that, I mean, leadership buy-in has always bothered me, because people say leadership buy-in, and then the management below them or the leaders that are actually doing the work aren't actually showing that they bought in by what they're doing. You know, like, if you want collaboration, don't come to the sales leadership comes to the meeting and has no idea what marketing is doing, yet you tell your sales team that they're supposed to be collaborating with marketing. If sales and marketing leadership aren't on the same page, well, how can you expect that? I think that's extremely important. And actually, the funny part about how I kind of I was in an organization a couple organizations ago that they actually would not give me access to sales data or the CRM or to the meetings that I was working in, and I was customer facing, and so I ended up signing up for my own CRM tool, getting someone from IT to export me some data, and I imported it into my own social CRM solution, because that was my way of trying to, hey, I want to know what sales is doing, I want to have insights, and that's changed. You know, those times aren't today, but I think that collaboration, like you said, I think it's a leadership thing. I think it's a training element, and it's so funny that all of this talk comes back to, if we're talking social selling, if we're talking, social media marketing, if we're talking, evangelism, creating ambassadors, everything seems to live back to a culture and that roots in collaboration. And I think no matter what we're talking about on this chat or other chats that we involve in, it's exciting because I think as long as we're all in agreement that this has to happen, I think we have a better chance of it succeeding.
Yeah, and I think again it has to start from the top. If the leadership isn't setting the example, the leadership always sets the example. We just have to make sure they're setting the right example. And if they want one of collaboration, then they have to collaborate. They have to hold the managers that report to them accountable for doing the same thing, and all the way down the food chain. Otherwise, it would be insane for somebody, some poor salesman at the bottom of the sales food chain to go collaborate when he sees everybody up on the top not doing that. So, we have to do that. And it has to be beyond just lip service. At the same time, we can't be naive. There's sometimes where collaboration just isn't needed. Mort Hansen wrote a terrific book on collaboration and on internal collaborations and about the failure of them. And sometimes, we need to know what our part of the job is, and we go off and do that job. But it's not done in isolation from what the organization is doing. It's just best that we do that job by ourselves. So there's some things where, I'm going to task marketing, we're aligned with what we're trying to achieve, we're aligned with how we want to engage the customer, but you're best going off doing that yourself and not bothering me, the salesperson, or somebody else. And likewise, salespeople will have to go off and do some things by themselves. But as long as we have that, we're doing that purposefully and not accidentally, or just because of the way we've always done things, then we're going to be on the right track.
Yeah, and I often say that, collaboration often doesn't mean that you have to be working together. Oftentimes collaboration means you're giving a transparent insight into what you're doing. And that's really
Absolutely.
where I come at it, because if I know that what you're doing, it doesn't mean I have to have input into it or have, but knowing that you're doing that doesn't waste my cycles, but it also keeps my story aligned. I had a really bad experience that I was, as an evangelist sitting right there in front of a customer, and I had prepped and went through all of our collaboration documents and said, hey, I know what this customer knows. I started presenting to them, and little did I know, a week beforehand, they had an entire sales pitch from our sales organization. Because our sales organization didn't add that to our documentation or tell me, I ended up looking like a fool, because they're like, wait a second, we've already heard all of this from your sales team a week ago. And I just preached leading up to that how we had kind of combined, and so when I went back there, their answer was, well, we weren't collaborating on that. And I was like, I know, but look what it just did to me. If you had just transparently posted that you had this engagement, not only would I have not looked like a fool, but it would have saved me cycles, and I would have approached it differently. And I think all of those changes are good changes and things that are going the right direction. Leaders like yourself that are paving the way. And I think we have about 8 minutes left, so I'm going to jump into question 10 and question 11 because I really like both of these questions. So, as a salesperson, what should I be doing next to kind of make this next step to make this work for my team?
Well, as a salesperson, you got to, as a salesperson, a marketing person, a product manager, you got to start realizing our customers are too complex, our organizations are too complex for us to work in isolation. This whole concept around collaboration and teamwork, we have to work together. None of us has enough time, enough money, enough resources to go off and do things kind of on our own and independently. So we have to first start saying, who do I need to work with? How do we need to work together? And start looking at who are your counterparts. So if I'm a salesperson or a sales manager, I'm going to start finding out marketing, product management, customer service, and I'm going to get them on my team helping me engage with the customer most effectively and efficiently. I'm going to go to my pre-sales people and get them on my team. I often kind of like looking at the salesperson. The modern day salesperson is more a resource manager than a salesperson, because their job is maybe to get the right resources in front of the customer at the right time. But likewise, marketing needs to be doing the same thing, of saying we can't do this all by ourselves. We have to start looking at who are partners in doing this. So we really start putting teeth behind the collaboration. We put teeth behind a process design and a buying experience design. And then the final thing is if we exclude the customer from any of those conversations, we're doing this backwards. We have to start from the customer point of view.
There's the nugget right there. I think that's the take home that we all should. I know I've written a bunch of articles on it. I've been reading so much about, to me, there is no social business, there is no social selling without, the customers that keep the lights on. And so, too often we leave them out of the process and the thinking. And when I talk community and where I came from, social business, is I think of community and customers as your internal ones, AKA your employees, mm-hmm. and your external ones being, the community on the external. I think that's you hit it home right there. From sales and marketing, it's an idea that, I think the collaboration has to be something that you're willing to give up. Even if it's a salesperson and you want marketing's help, or you want marketing to include you in content creation, well, why don't you include them in mapping out and explaining to them, the buyer process or why this RFP failed, so that you're educating them to create better content. I think it's as crazy as it sounds. I'll take it back to that give idea. When someone's thinking about, how do I drive collaboration? How do I get my team to buy in? Well, what can you give them first? Because they're not going to buy in if they're just saying, hey, give me. And I think that's you hit that on the head. That if we listen to the customers first, and then we kind of tie those together, I think we have a winning solution.
Yep. Yeah.
So I guess I have we have about 5 minutes left, and this has been amazing. I appreciate you being smiling to every one of my questions. That also is very very rewarding for me. And as someone that preys on nonverbal cues to know when to shut up. I apologize to Rachel and yourself if I end up talking too much, since I'm missing the visual side. But one of the things the last kind of talking note from yourself is just what do you see when we're talking social selling and we're talking this collaboration between departments? Where do you see the biggest success? Where's the quick wins coming in the next 6 months, so that this isn't something that isn't about driving change, it's really about educating?
Wow, that's a big one. One is, well, I'll, at the risk of being very controversial, I'll see we're starting to make tremendous gains when we start eliminating the word social from selling and marketing. Social is a necessary part of the tools and channels by which we engage customers, but there are all sorts of different ways we engage customers, whether it's face-to-face, whether it's through some traditional ways, and so on and so forth. So we got to start eliminating social, and just talking about what are the most effective ways that we engage and connect with our customers in ways that are meaningful and create value for them. So there, I think that's a starting point, and then we start looking at really doing that. Get out, do some simple things. Get out, get salespeople, get people out and visit customers. Get your executives out, get marketing people. It sounds like it's so simple, but it's so profound. I have a client, high technology client, that their product management hasn't been to see a customer in 5 years. So you think, how are you going to design products that really solve customer problems? And there are a lot of reasons how they got to this place. None of them are good anymore. So they go out and say, gee, these customers are really pretty cool people. I learned a lot from them. There's some interesting stuff that we can do to help them solve their problems. So it starts with very, very simple steps, and again, I sound like an intensely broken record, But if you don't start with the customer, you're going to do it wrong 100% of the time. You're going to have to restart 100% of the time, and you're going to cost yourself gobs of money and gobs of opportunity. So it really is simple.
No, I think that's a great way to end the topic, because the importance of the customer. And I also the controversy is not going to go far with me either. I'm a big fan of the entire idea of social business and social media. To me, is because the word social in there, the first thing someone thinks about is cat pictures on Facebook, right? So they think they kind of loop things together, when social is one element. And just like social business to me is a philosophy of how we're doing business, not really the actual step of going on to a social channel and doing something. So much of that has to do with just the concept. And social selling, to me, a lot of it, when someone asked recently, when I was doing this kind of discussion about social selling, for me, a lot of it came down to social selling. To me, was just a way of us listening to the customers and being engaged with the community. It had nothing to do with the social media channel itself. It's just that social media is the greatest, easiest, most real-time situation we have today. But I can do social selling at a bar on happy hour because I'm engaging, I'm listening, I'm providing them content. Maybe I'm sharing a link or connecting with them on social media. So no, I think this was really great, Dave. I really appreciate you joining us today. Not only the questions that we kind of came up with and Rachel kind of driven from really getting the community involved, but we had a really active community today. Tons of great people chiming in. Thankfully, for many of us, the YouTube video will be out there after this our chat, so people can watch this afterwards and kind of get a recap, or also hit slow-mo because I talk so fast, so they like to hit pause so that they can pause that side. But we really appreciate it. I know, Rachel, if you have some closing remarks on your side.
Nope, I am. This was one of my favorite chats so far. So many tweetable quotes from you, Dave, and also our community today. I'm excited to scroll through the transcripts later. And I completely agree with your closing statements about eliminating the word social. It's not a novelty. It's definitely here to stay. And in the era of transparency, marketing and sales, and the social business model that we're building, it's all departments and all personnel, and I think we touched on that a few times today, and I was really happy to see that, because even though today our focus was strictly marketing and sales, but ultimately it's the entire organization leading from the C-level down that's going to make a business a success. So huge thank you. I'm a big fan of yours. I'll continue to share your content, and I'll definitely be sending out some posts later to our community to read to back up everything that we talked about today. So thank you again.
And
thank you. It's a real privilege to be part of this. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you again for joining us. Rachel, who do we have on next week?
Crap.
I actually was thinking about it. I was like, I should look it up. It's on a shared collaboration document that I'm part of.
I know, yeah. So we're so transparent. My memory is failing.
I'm the lazy one that you should have just said, well, you should have looked it up. But we'll be at same bat channel, same bat time next week. We'll be here, hashtag SS Hour throughout the week for content and engagement. Once again, thank you to everybody on Twitter. Another amazing hour that flies by, and I kind of geeked out and created a hyperlapse of what a chat looks like from my view. So I'll be sharing that up there so you kind of see what it looks like from the Twitter chat host side. So thanks again.
No fair. Dave got to put his best foot forward with the headshot.
He did. He's right there, front and center. So. Thanks again, all, and we will see you next week. Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you.